most of the water you're seeing in this movie is fake. It's animated, it's CGI. How far they've come with technology and how that was a huge challenge for them, and that's why this movie took so long to make, is developing the technology to create realistic looking water. Hello, movie friends. Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water. We just watched it in IMAX 3D. It absolutely blew our minds. Jim, how'd you like it?
I loved it. You know, I think James Cameron again proved himself to be the king of sequels. This was an excellent film. It improved in many elements on the first film with Avatar, and I think they did a great job of presenting it in movie theaters for IMAX 3D specifically, where I don't remember if they did this for the first Avatar movie, but they previewed it. Obviously, the last couple trailers were in 3D, like the last 3 trailers playing at AMC IMAX were in 3D to kind of get you ready for the 3D experience. Because I remember, I think the first time we saw IMAX 3D with Avatar, the first one, they didn't do that. And it took me like maybe 5 minutes to really get used to the 3D. But as soon as Avatar: The Way of Water started, I was pretty much there. My brain and my eyes were ready for it. And then that big IMAX, like the pushing with the numbers, that got my eyes watering, and I was just prepared to go. But they did a really clever job preparing your eyes and your brain for the 3D experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was smart to open with those trailers. It was the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer, and then the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania trailer were 3D, and I felt like I adjusted in those trailers. And then when the film started, I was like already like the first opening establishing shots. I was completely used to the 3D. And FYI, James's voice sounds a little extra nasally today. He got a bloody nose, so
when we hit record. So it's stuffed with tissue paper right now.
So it sounds quite nasally. That's why.
I'll pull it out in a little bit. I just had to plug it up, man.
And I found the 3D experience to be really breathtaking and immersive. I was completely sold on the illusion, and it really felt like I was immersed in this other world. I remember we watched the trailer at IMAX headquarters a month ago in with the 3D glasses, and we saw another film, but they showed the trailer in 3D, and it was just an awe-inspiring 2 minutes. But then with this film, I felt really immersed in it. It didn't feel like 3D-y within 10 minutes of the film. It just felt like I was just immersed in the characters, in the environments, and it was really stunning. I think it was probably the best 3D experience I've ever had at a theater. Otherwise, I don't enjoy 3D. I'm probably going to see the film not in 3D as well, just to get that other viewing experience. But the high frame rate plus the 3D and what I would consider the greatest CGI animation ever put on film with this movie really sold me on the world, and I felt completely immersed in it.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but Avatar, it looked realistic. But Avatar: The Way of Water looked real. It was astounding what they did with their animation and CGI, and obviously we've been waiting 13 years for this movie. They took about 8 years developing the technology, and they started filming in 2017 when they started doing all their underwater tests and everything like that. So we'll get into a lot of specifics of how they actually made this film behind the scenes when it comes to cinematography, virtual filmmaking, 3D filmmaking, underwater motion capture, which is the first time this has ever been done, underwater motion capture. It never been done. That was like one of the first big challenges they had to pull off and figure out how to do it, which is a really funny way how they did it. Instead of using scuba gear, they just had to hold your breath. But it's just incredible filmmaking. And, you know, I would say the story, it's kind of like the first one. It's nothing we've never really not seen before. It's a little predictable at times. Some of the characters are a little cliched and predictable as well. But at the end of the day, it's a solid story. Lots of new interesting characters, so please bear with us as we are pronouncing these names of characters we're just meeting. We've only seen this movie once, and these names didn't exist really before Avatar, so we're just bear with us on the pronunciations of the names, and in case we mix some characters up.
I'm just going to call a bunch of them the kid.
Yeah, the kids, the second son.
That's easier.
Young Sigourney Weaver. I think that's the way we're going to go with it.
I agree. It's not a perfect film, but I found this film to be better than the first Avatar. In terms of its emotional gravity. I was an absolute emotional wreck by the end of the film. I cried a few times, but when the movie was over and those final moments happened, I was weeping. And I was surprised how emotional it was, because the first film, it definitely had moments, especially when the big tree was destroyed by the Sky People. That was a really powerful moment. But this film had a different kind of powerhouse in terms of the emotional stakes and the family that was built. And we won't spoil anything quite yet, but there are some really, really grave situations that happen in this film. And I found it to be very emotionally powerful and extremely touching. I found a deeper connection with the characters than I did in the first film combined. So it was just great work by the actors, but also because the CGI animation is so remarkable, I didn't for a moment question anything that I was seeing. In the first Avatar, you buy into it, but you also know that you're watching CGI animation. But with this film, I really felt like I was watching real beings interacting, and it felt like that. Like just the opening of the film when the family are just sitting in their canopy, holding each other, goofing off and joking. Like I was like, it looks like real creatures, like real alien beings, like just there on screen. And I found it just so remarkable how the animators were able to expand on their technology, and there were so many shots where I was just like, how is that not real? there were a couple times where I just raised my hands. I was like, are you kidding me? This isn't really on screen. It was confoundingly impressive what the animators did.
Not to mention, most of the water you're seeing in this movie is fake. It's animated. It's CGI. And we got a lot of flack. We made a clip about that and talked about that. Like a few months ago, we kind of were talking about Avatar: The Way of Water and previewing it when they started releasing behind-the-scenes images and our first looks at it and the first stills of the film, high-quality stills. They were like released on Empire, I think, or something like that. And we talked about it, and we're like, it's incredible. I don't know how they made this water look so real. A lot of people are like, it's real water. What are you talking about? They filmed it for real water. Almost 90% of the water in this movie or around there is fake water. It's CGI. So that was a huge challenge, which we'll talk about when we start getting into the behind the scenes and, visual effects work that they had to do, especially with Weta Digital, and how far they've come with technology and how that was a huge challenge for them. And that's why this movie took so long to make, is developing the technology to create realistic looking water, which we've seen before. Like, I think Luca, the water looks really terrific in that film. Finding Nemo, the water looks really great in that as well. But this movie just took it to a whole new level. Again, changing the game for animation, for CGI, for motion capture, just like the first one did as well. And I think it was... in terms of waiting 13 years for a sequel and James Cameron saying it needs to make $2 billion or bust, and the hype, I think the hype is satisfying. And, my thirst has been quenched for Avatar after waiting so long.
That water quenched
it?
it?
I think it was great. My expectations were met, even surpassed in some elements, kind of just like stagnant in other areas. But I think the animation, the CGI was just so stellar that it really makes up for the plot elements that I'm not a huge fan of and the characters that I thought were a little bland, but that spectacle of this movie, movies like this, and then I would say Top Gun Maverick, bringing the spectacle of cinema back to theaters that we feel like we haven't really enjoyed so much the last few years, especially with lockdowns and COVID. And this movie obviously spectacle over story in a lot of ways, but still really great thematic elements of family and the love, as well as, what was I just about to say?
Something great, I'm sure.
Something really emotional.
I'm sure it was going to be awesome.
There's a thematic element that's really emotional. Oh, I was going to say, the emotional beats, there are a lot more in this film compared to the first one. You said you brought up the tree and everything. That's probably one of the only devastating moments in that movie. A few other beats here and there, but this movie has several beats of emotional stakes and swings going back and forth.
And I gotta say, so the tree sequence in the first film is a great metaphor for deforestation and, humankind's destruction of nature. And in this film, there was, I think it's an even better portrayal of mankind's impact on the earth, because you get the deforestation, which is, it was smart how they open it with new humans just arriving and just like setting up shop.
It was like Star Wars movie, almost watching it like a new one.
It was wild, but also the hunting scene of the humans against the Tulkun to be extremely tragic and horrifying in a lot of ways. And the way they filmed it was just by showing it from the perspective of both parties and how ruthless these humans were, and this beautiful creature. And we learn how later on in the film how intelligent they are, how emotional they are, and in a lot of ways, it's proved to be that they are more intelligent than both human beings and the natives of Pandora. And I found that sequence, which was quite long, it was like 15 minutes, to be absolutely tragic and horrifying. And I think that really added to what James Cameron's motives for making these movies of showing, translating metaphors of our impact on the world and of nature. And I just found it horrifying, but in an important way. And I think it absolutely, what he's doing with the films absolutely justifies their existence and their big budgets, because, you know, if you can make more people aware of things like this and make them look at the world in a different way, then that's worth it. But I found that scene in particular extremely powerful and resonant.
And focusing on the oceans, because a lot of people, you know, we're not exposed to the ocean very often, and people, you know, plenty of people care about the destruction of the oceans, but it's kind of not as talked about as other parts of the earth. Now, Avatar: The Way of Water was directed by James Cameron, written by James Cameron, Adam Silver, Rick Jaffa, Josh Friedman, and Shane Salerno. It follows Jake Sully, who lives with his newfound family formed on the extrasolar moon Pandora. Once a familiar threat returns to finish what was previously started, Jake must work with Neytiri and the army of the Na'vi race to protect their home. On IMDb right now, as the date of filming, it is an 8.1. Rotten Tomatoes has it at a 78% critic score, 94% audience score, and this was arguably the most expensive film ever made. It's made a box office already of over $500 million globally in just less than a week, and this is the seventh film in history to cost $300 million or more after Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, Avengers Age of Ultron, Justice League, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. A little information on the screenwriting behind the story, and this is information from IBC. Screenwriters including Rick Jaffa and Adam Silver, who both scripted the Planet of the Apes reboots, as well as Josh Friedman and Shane Salerno, were hired to shape the notes of James Cameron's thousands of pages of books in notebooks into an ambitious series of 4 films. The process took months, but Cameron wanted to have all 4 screenplays completed before moving on to production. So that's why he was spending so much time in developing technology, as well as they were writing number 2, number 3, and number 4. And number 5, the script is done, but that's not set for production yet. That hasn't been approved for production. But they're also filming 2, 3, and 4 back to back. They're filming right now, so they're still going in production for that as well. But he wanted to get all 4 of those new sequel scripts done before they started production, which is a smart thing to do, but obviously takes a lot of time. And now, rather than create a host of new planets and moons, James Cameron chose to continue to explore more biomes and cultures of Pandora itself with the Avatar sequels. He reasoned that the moon could contain a range of landscapes just like Earth. Pandora is, after all, a metaphor for our world. The director has spent much of the intervening decade underwater himself, pursuing environmental exploration projects, including setting a solo deep dive record of 35,787 feet to the bottom of the Mariana Trench in 2012. Seemingly at home in the sea as on land, Cameron appears to want to take the legacy of filmmaker and aquatic pioneer Jacques Cousteau to another level.
I found the water people and the water tribes to be really stunning and beautiful. I like how that tribe, those people, their features are slightly different from the Na'vi, and also they have like these almost like fins along their forearms to help them swim better. Their tails are flat and wider to help them swim as well. So have evolved over time for living underwater, and that's why when the Sullys arrive, they're kind of teased, and the others are like, "How are they going to swim? Look at their hands. They don't." And look at their tails. They're not going to be able to swim very fast. I love the creativity of the animals, the new species of animals we see, especially the underwater ones, and how the Na'vi can fly on their animals. These water people can swim and basically fly underwater. And also, I love the Tulkun, which are essentially like great whales in a way. I found it extremely creative. But also practical and very believable with the world that they had already created. And also we got to see more underwater life and its connection to Ewa and the spirit of Pandora, and how especially Kiri can connect with it. And I liked Kiri's connection to Ewa and how she can eventually, change. She can control animals and plant life at her will, and they listen to her, they help her. It's difficult for her because she is an outcast. She's strange. She's looked at as weird for having this strange connection to things, but I found it to be a beautiful story for her character arc.
So the water tribe and these water peoples who live in these islands in Pandora in the ocean, they're called the Metkaina, And so it's really cool to go there and get a new kind of culture of Na'vi. And there's almost kind of like, you could argue maybe kind of a different race of Na'vi because, their skin tone is a little lighter than the forest dwellers. And I'm sure maybe when we get more Na'vi explored in future Avatar films, because he's going to do, this movie was about 65% water. The next one, Avatar 3, will be about 30% water. Avatar 4 will be about 10 to 15% water, and even fewer water in the fifth film if they make that one.
I wonder if we'll get like an Earth tribe.
Yeah, maybe different obviously landscapes adapt.
A desert tribe would be cool.
Yeah, desert tribe or something like that. So obviously creatures and beings, they adapt to their landscape and their environment. So that's why we have obviously different races and different skin tones, just like different races and skin tones amongst the Na'vi, you could argue. And like Eddie said, they've evolved to their water landscape and their water lifestyle, which is really fascinating to see. And I thought it was really interesting and really clever too. Also, all these new characters, they're really interesting. Kate Winslet is phenomenal as Ronal. She didn't have as much to do as I thought she would compared to all the behind-the-scenes information we were learning. I'm sure that's all going to come into play for Avatar 3. And then we also
Cliff
had...
Curtis was great.
Cliff Curtis was so freaking awesome in this movie. He had a lot to do. He's the tribal leader of the Metcaina. And then we also have just a ton of new characters. And I think it was great to bring the family element on both sides of the Metcaina, as well as Jake Sully and his clan and Neytiri's family. The Sullys stick together.
So cute.
And I like to see this gearhead, how he kind of like runs his family, and him and Neytiri run their family, and how he disciplines his sons versus his daughters. And
he's like, take a knee when they do a meeting.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just like, it's like combat or like militaristic, but also in a way like sports in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like taking a knee, let's huddle up. I thought it was pretty fun and cute. And versus the family elements of the Metcaina and their tribal leaders' sons and daughters, how they're supposed to integrate together. And we have like the cliche moments of bullying, of harassment, of putting another child into a dire situation, a life and death situation, where he fortunately survives when he's saved by that whale.
Great scene. Yeah.
Great sequences in this movie. And again, I don't know half these characters' names off the top of my head, so we're doing our best. And this cast list is enormous. And it's hard to like.
It's an ensemble.
It's huge.
It's a big
huge
ensemble.
cast, but all the child actors and all the young actors are phenomenal. Especially Jack Champion, who played Spider, who's basically Space Tarzan in a lot of ways. And he was actually cast really young, and I think he was only 13 or 14 when he was filming this movie as Spider, because now he's like hit his full growth spurt and he's an adult now. But I think he was 13 when he filmed this movie as
I looked him up on IMDb and he looks completely different because he's like an adult now.
That's how long ago they filmed this movie.
Yeah,
it's filmed in 2017.
Yeah, it's hard to. It makes sense, but you don't realize that. And I mean, the amount of post-production put into this film is just really impressive. And I mean, kudos to the artists, because I mean, they did a phenomenal job. And what really sold me in the trailer especially, but with Spider's character in particular, and then watching it in the film. But when I watched the trailer for the first time, when you see a human with the Na'vi and they both look like they're really there, that's, for me, I was like, wow, this looks amazing. When you have the Spider character right next to a Na'vi character, and you're like, they both look like they're really there in camera. And it felt like that the entire film, whenever Spider was on screen. I didn't feel like he was surrounded by people in mocap suits who were animated. I felt like watching him, he was surrounded by real characters and these real beings. And I found that to be probably the most impressive aspect to the CGI animation, was that the live action character looked just as real as the animated character.
And let's go through the cast some more. Obviously, Sam Worthington back as Jake Sully. He's probably been waiting for this role to come back for a while. Zoe Saldana, who's one of the busiest actresses in Hollywood. She was obviously phenomenal as Neytiri as usual. Sigourney Weaver came back, and she plays Kiri. And I found it a little odd. Even though they kind of de-aged her voice, it still sounded like...
They brought it up a pitch, but it still sounded like an older woman's voice.
For Sigourney Weaver.
It was throwing me off for sure.
A little bit. I feel like they should have just cast a young actress. But she did all the mocap for Kiri, which is really fascinating and really a testament to her work ethic for sure. Like being underwater, doing all those sequences.
I understand what Cameron wanted to do, but it just was taking me out of the scenes a bit.
Sometimes. Like her voice was just too mature for a 10 or 11-year-old. Stephen Lang is back as Quaritch. I thought it was really clever how they brought him back, and how the Sky people have decided to go full Na'vi and just basically cloned with their human DNA and memories of their Marines, cloned them into Na'vi and grew them in a lab, and then are sending them to Pandora using their own strengths and abilities against the Na'vi themselves. Great to get this great antagonist back in this movie.
Yeah.
Let's see. Cliff Curtis plays Tonawari, that's his name. Joel David Moore's back as Norm. CCH Pounder as Moat. Edie Falco as General Ardmore.
I didn't know she was in it.
It was so great to see her.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't seen her in so long in like a big movie or anything since obviously The Sopranos, but it was so awesome. I was like, oh my God, it's Edie Falco.
I read this interview with her this morning, and she said that she didn't even realize the movie was out. She thought the movie had already come out and failed, and she just never heard about it. So and then she's like, "Oh, the movie's out now! Oh, wow, good for that!" Because they filmed it so long ago.
That's really
and
funny.
I'm sure she's not like on social media and stuff.
She probably doesn't understand that it took 5 years for it to get released.
Yeah.
Brendan Cowell is Scoresby. I believe he was the ship captain. Jermaine Clement makes a great role in this movie. He's Dr. Carvin, the marine biologist.
He did a decent American accent.
Yeah, pretty solid American
pretty
accent.
American.
A little New Zealand slip-ups here and there. But his character is like one of those characters who's like, yeah, you don't like what's going on, but you're still a part of it.
Profiting off
kind
of
of like conflicting character. Then all these young actors and actresses did phenomenal jobs as the young Na'vi.
The kids did a great job. Yeah.
Giovanni Ribisi's back for a little cameo. So is Dilip Rao as Max Patel. He's back for a little bit. But this cast was really terrific, really phenomenal ensemble.
That was also a major difference from the first film. This was a big ensemble, and the first film was really Jake and Neytiri's story. And this one, it was everyone's story in a lot of ways. And I think that, so the second act was quite long, and I think they could have shaved off about 15 minutes. But what it did do, and what they did a great job is when they get to the Water Tribe, that's when we really get to know the family, get to know the kids. We're learning the way of water along with them. And it allows the audience to make these connections to all these new characters. So I understand that James Cameron wanted to take his time with that entire sequence. And that really makes it the finale more impactful when everyone's in danger because you know everyone so well. But I do think they could have shaved off probably 15 minutes from the runtime to just speed up that middle act a little bit better. But otherwise, I think that they did a terrific job with such a big new ensemble of giving everyone their bit, understanding that, showing that each character is slightly different in what makes them unique and what their own little conflicts and motivations are, especially with the kids. And I found especially the little daughter to be super cute. She's adorable. But the two sons did a good job. They have a great relationship. It's complex, and also it's quite complex with their father, Jake, who is really just focused on being a protector. And that's his theme. That's his theme, and his thorough arc. His arc in this film is he believes that the best course of action is to be a protector and to run away from conflict, to do whatever it takes to protect his family and to avoid violence and war. And it takes the course of this film to realize that running away is not the way to protect his family. They're going to have to fight. And it's not just his family that needs to be protected. It's every family. It's all of Pandora needs to be protected from the Sky People. And the only way to do that is to band together and fight. And that's what it takes him the entire course of this story to realize that.
And Loak is very much a lead character in much of this film. He's the second eldest son of Jake and Neytiri. Netayem is the older brother. He's like the perfect son in Loak's eyes. But Loak is the one who's kind of getting off into trouble, getting into adventures. He forms that bond with the Tulkhan named Payakan, who saves his life after he gets duped by Aonang into being stuck in the middle of the ocean.
Great job with the names.
Thanks. And attacked by that giant fish because, it's these kids, they're young, they're naive, and they're ignorant, and they're innocent. So obviously, they've been forest dwellers their entire lives, and obviously they're familiar with the threats and dangers of the forest because Na'vi, they open the film up saying that it's full of so many dangers. Obviously, the ocean is going to be filled with equal amounts of dangers, if not more dangerous creatures, just like our oceans often are as well. And I think, obviously, Loak is just so prideful and wants to prove himself that his arrogance kind of gets in his way a lot of the times. But he's also an outcast, just like the Tulkhan. He befriends Payakan There's a great storyline of him trying to find acceptance throughout this entire film, not only from the Na'vi and his tribe and his family, but also specifically from his father, which finally at the end of the film, after he saves his father's life from beneath the ship, his father says, "I see you, son." For like, you can assume it's maybe the first time he's ever said that to him.
Yeah, that was a great emotional moment. That gave me goosebumps, and it was amazing. And I also like the detail they have where Jake and Neytiri's kids, they're called half-breeds by the others, and they do have a different genetic code from the Na'vi, where they have 4 fingers and a thumb, as opposed to 3 fingers and a thumb, and they're often teased by the others for, look at their fingers, and so I like how that there is some human DNA in them, which makes them different, and they are the first of their kind in a lot of ways. So the entire family, they are outcasts, but Jake and Neytiri's stronghold in the community and war, being celebrated for their abilities in war and for saving the tribe, it allowed them to really flourish in the Na'vi tribe. But when they go to a new tribe, they are immediately looked at as very different.
And almost like freaks,
Yeah.
aliens, that's what they're called. And really, Neytiri is the only one that's like a pure blood Na'vi, you could say a lot of ways. But she's such a great character and a great mother and spouse.
Zoe Saldana killed me in this. She's so good.
She always supports her family no matter what. Also, Spider, back to him for a little bit. I think he's a really solid character because he adds a lot more depth to Quaritch, who's back as our antagonist. So Quaritch obviously gets killed by Neytiri in the first Avatar film. His DNA memories were sent back to a lab to create a clone of himself as a Na'vi, a genetic Na'vi, not an avatar like some of the other characters use, which is again why it's a really good plot. Now they're going to send these marine Na'vis to Pandora to take out Jake Sully.
It's smart to differentiate. It's not an avatar. He's
Exactly.
not plugged in. He is a Na'vi.
But Spider adds so much humanity to Quaritch because even though he kind of tries to disassociate himself from Spider in many ways, he does try the personal approach, but he also shuts down the mental torturing method that Edie Falco's character, the general, is trying to use to get the information out of Spider once he's captured. He shuts that down out of, you could say, love for his son. He also doesn't want his son to die when he's holding...
when Neytiri has him.
When Neytiri has Spider at knife point, and he also has, I think it was Kiri at knife point. And he's the one that backs out and drops the knife because he doesn't want anything to happen to Spider or Miles, you could say. And he has a connection to him, even though he tells him, like, I have no connection to you. We mean nothing to each other. I'm not your father. I have nothing to do with him. I just have his memories. He actually does feel like a father deep down. I think it comes out. And it brings humanity to this antagonist who's so evil in the first film. Obviously horrifically evil in this film as well, but there's just a nuance added to the character that I think it really needed.
Yeah, and then he calls him Spider's son at the end of the film, but Spider leaves him to go be with the Sullys, to become a Sully.
Son for a
son. I will say, I think that Stephen Lang did an amazing job, and I think that it was really smart how they brought the Colonel back, and I think it worked better than the first film. And it was a better performance and a more complex version of the character, and I really liked how they brought him back. And I like how the scale of the conflict was a little bit smaller than the first one, whereas in this one, the Colonel's just hunting the Sullys because Jake is such an important asset to Pandora because of his knowledge of the Sky People, because of his ability with military formation strategies and understanding how the Sky People operate. He is their most valuable asset, so that's why the Colonel and his crew are on this mission to find Jake and kill him and his family, because if they take out Sully, then they have a much better chance of dominating Pandora. I will say I would have liked it if the Colonel died at the end of the film.
Yeah.
I think that I wasn't sure how I felt about knowing that he's going to come back and then is he going to be in every movie. I think that there may have been more potential to get like a better antagonist maybe that suits the later stories. Obviously, James Cameron can do whatever he wants, but when he survived at the end of this film, I found that kind of like an odd choice, and I was like, I think we're kind of done with this character. I'm happy to see him go and to get a new antagonist. So I found it just like, oh man, is he surviving this? That threw me off.
Unless he's going to give him a redemption arc, maybe, and he wants to fight
to be
for
a Na'vi?
the Na'vi eventually by the third or fourth film. But yeah, I agree. I think 2 movies is plenty. I was fine, like you said. I agreed to have him back for this film. I thought it was a really clever way to bring him back into the movie, and again, a great antagonist to Jake Sully. But yeah, at the end of the film, I was disappointed that Spider saved him because obviously you can assume Spider would have saved him because he's got a good heart. He's a good kid. And he was raised right and really well by Jake Sully and Neytiri and the Na'vi. Well, not necessarily Neytiri. She kind of hates Spider.
It's just him. She just doesn't think he belongs there.
Yeah, well, he was hiding from her on the ship.
He thought she was going to kill him.
And she probably was.
She was bloodthirsty. She had bloodlust in her eyes.
Not once did she say, "Are you okay?" So, I mean, I was a little disappointed too. I thought he should have passed away. He should have died, I think, at the end of the film.
Because I think how much more can that character add?
That's what
that he hasn't already done.
I think James will probably give him a redemption arc.
Yeah.
Which can that character even ever redeem himself?
I don't think so. He's caused too much death and destruction.
Exactly. But the plot's solid for this film. So they're trying to find Jake Sully. Jake Sully and the Sullys, they have to they have to exile themselves from their tribe. He no longer is the leader. He passes it off to somebody else. And they go into exile because they don't want anything to happen to their tribe. So they find refuge in the water tribes, the Metcaine, I think that's what it said the first time. And fortunately, they take him in because they all know of who he is. They know him. They know Neytiri. Kate Winslet's character, Ronal, she does not want them immediately, but, they finally accept them, which is not the best decision because obviously the war is going to come there. I would say it's fine until, some plot points for me. I understand. You got to push the plot forward.
Yeah.
Sending the ship to come check out Kiri. Obviously, they're gonna pick up on that helicopter. You're supposed to be in exile, and you're sending coordinates digitally. You're sending where you are, your location to people, and ships. Obviously, the sky people are gonna pick up on a ship that's going somewhere. So I think that's like a plot point that James has to put in the movie to push the plot forward. How are they gonna find them? They can't just go through all of these hundreds and hundreds of islands. It would take forever to find Jake Sully, or before they even found out where he was. They didn't even know he was where the islands are.
Yeah, I understand that they were desperate and he wanted to save Kiri, his daughter, and he made a choice, but I also think that there wasn't enough gravities put on that decision in the film. It wasn't, nobody said like, oh, how dare you send the ship over here?
Obviously, like Jake's a smart guy. His character should be like, I shouldn't do that because they're going to come looking for us. They're going to know where we are. So it's just plot. You gotta push the plot forward. I get it,
but I like the character of Jake in this film, and because he's been through a lot, and I love the opening of the film where we saw the growth of the family. I found it a really beautiful sequence, but he is so obsessed with the protection element of being a father, where he is hard on his sons, and he does treat them kind of like soldiers, and as like grunt soldiers to him being a high commander. The way he speaks to them is very militaristic. And it all comes from his desire to keep them safe and his love for them. And especially after that opening battle scene where his kids, his two sons, enter the battle when they're not supposed to.
Oh, the train raid?
Yeah, the train raid. And he cusses them out, but the way he speaks to them is like soldiers. It's the way his character has evolved, where the protection of his family matters more than anything. But then I believe he softens by the end of the film and understands that the error of his ways of how he's approaching raising his kids, and he sees that protecting them doesn't mean like being so hard on them and just running away from everything, but I can raise them to be good men, and then they can become good fighters, and we can't keep running, we have to fight. And so it was a great evolution for his character in this film. It was a very traditional father and mother dynamic for the family. But by the third act, Neytiri proves herself to be just as fierce a warrior as anyone. And I love the final battle sequence where it was just Jake and Neytiri going to save their kids on the sinking ship, also reminiscent of Titanic. It was great, and it's amazing to see when like Neytiri is fighting the humans and how small they are in comparison, and then she is just like 12 feet tall, and it's just amazing to see that scale and the change in size. But it looked so real. In the first film, it was definitely noticeable, especially when you have a human and a Na'vi and shots together. But with this film, with the lighting, especially like how water like was glistening on their faces, and one of my favorite shots was when Neytiri and Took are in the sinking ship and they emerge from the water in one of the hallways that's rising with water, and I was like, is this really happening? I was like, is that real?
It's insane. The close-ups are shockingly
Yeah.
good, especially with the fire glistening on them and everything, the light.
Yeah, and then but Neytiri taking out that entire squadron basically single-handed was unbelievable.
Yeah, we talked about this recently, seeing strong protective fathers in film that we kind of have been disappearing from a lot of big franchise films. And it's nice again to see that kind of character, because it's important to see not just a strong, nurturing, protective mother, but also the same thing for a father as well. And like I said, we're losing that in a lot of mainstream movies, I feel. So I love seeing that as well, because, Jake Sully's a great character, great father. He's hard on his sons, but like Anthony said, it's out of love and out of protection and trying to save them. Now, in addition to the plot being the hunt for Jake Sully, we have a new, highly valuable resource on Pandora that the Sky People are going after. And it's no longer unobtainium. It's called Amirta. When Sky Army captures and kills a Tulkun, those whales, they extract a golden yellow fluid elixir from their brains, and it's referred to as Amirta, which will stop aging, literally stops aging for humans. The term Amirta is a Sanskrit word that means immortality, which is referred within many Indian religions. This is another Sanskrit word used by James Cameron. He named this film series title Avatar, which is also a Sanskrit word meaning manifestation of divinity in bodily form. Now, Amirta is highly valuable. Just that vial that they take from the brain of the Tulkun that we watch slaughtered is worth about $80 million. And that's probably, 12 to 24 ounces of the elixir. It's tragic. It's horrific to watch, the whaling sequence, which is a huge problem still in the world. Whaling and shark hunting and just big fish hunting and just the way fish is
shark fin hunting is so sad.
Yeah, I mean, you can even rhinoceros hunting, elephant hunting. Yeah. It's so tragic. And then, like Andy said, it was a tough sequence to watch of these fishermen hunting the Tulkun.
So brutally, too.
And to watch the waste of the Tulkun, especially when Spider's like, that's all you're here for, just that elixir, this entire body, that's all you're going to use of this death and destruction of this species, is just to get this elixir. So I like how they changed to a new motivation for the Sky People to be back in Pandora. It was, clever. I think it works better than unobtainium, because even though unobtainium is just a meta term for the first film, for that material, for that resource, a lot of people hate that kind of meta term for it.
Yeah.
But
it's too on the nose.
Yeah, it's a little much sometimes. But Amirta is an excellent motivation for the Sky People to continue their horrific evil endeavors on Pandora, motivation for them to come back, besides going after Jake Sully.
And it's also much easier for them to extract, whereas if they want to get on Obtainium, it's always located underneath a major tribe, and so it's going to be all-out war to get it, so wasting resources, whereas hunting the Tulkun, there's nobody fighting them for it, so they're just basically doing it without any problems. So it's a much easier process for them to get that material.
This film has a very powerful opening, because obviously with the family element of the Sullys growing their clan, but then obviously we have the Sky People coming back to Pandora, and they waste no time basically terraforming a large part of the landscape. They're destroying the forests just from the jet engines and propellers and whatever from their ships, destroying the forest.
There's deceleration,
yeah, just so quickly creating their own little mini cement city on Pandora.
I found the cement city to be really striking and tragic to see in a powerful way, because James Cameron, he panned from the beautiful forest all the way to this concrete jungle. So from real jungle to concrete jungle, and just roads and bridges and highways and all concrete and metal. And it was just really sad to see. You could feel the destruction of the beautiful nature that was there, and it was really impactful.
All right, how about we get into our intermission, then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about Avatar: The Way of Water, the movie and story, and then also all the visual effects behind the scenes, how the heck they actually made this movie and why it looks so realistic.
Let's do it.
Before we continue, the best way to support Raiders of the Lost Podcast is to become a patron at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. We have different tiers: $2, $5, $10, $25, and $100 tiers. Each one gets you different perks. $100 tiers, obviously the ultimate perk system. Go check those out and definitely support the show by becoming a patron, as well as getting tickets to our first live show in downtown Los Angeles, which is going to be on Saturday, January 21st, 2023. You can get tickets for in-person, from dynastytypewriter.com. Just go on their calendar. January 21st, you'll find us there, as well as from the link in our Instagram bios. You can also live stream this show from anywhere around the world and get broadcast tickets online from moment.co/Raiders of the Lost. Again, moment.co/Raiders of the Lost. The link in our Instagram bios and everything will also take you to those ticket sales. That way you can watch the live broadcast of the show as it's happening around the world wherever you are.
This episode is sponsored by movieposters.com, the #1 place to get your posters online today. Use our special promo code Raiders10 to get 10% off your order right now. They have a gigantic selection of pretty much every movie and TV show imaginable in their poster library, as well as all sorts of sizes, framing, and even backlighting for your poster needs. These are high quality, they look beautiful, and they're super affordable. So go on over to movieposters.com and use our promo code Raiders10 to get 10% off your order today.
This episode was filmed on Blackmagic G2 6K pocket cinema cameras. Thank you so much to Blackmagic Design for these shockingly impressive cinema cameras that are also highly affordable, just a couple grand a pop on these. They work with photographic lenses as well as cinema and digital video lenses. They are phenomenal cameras. We got some pickup shots for our movie using them, so thank goodness for Blackmagic Design sending us 2 of the Blackmagic G2 6K pocket cinema cameras. All right, let's head into our intermission and begin with the movie quote competition. Anthony, you ready?
Ready.
The unknown future rolls towards us. I face it for the first time with a sense of hope.
The unknown future rolls towards us. I face it for the first time with a sense of hope. Huh. T2, Sarah Connor.
T1,
T1,
Sarah Connor.
damn it. Damn it.
Driving in the Jeep.
Yeah. At least I got the character right.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Good quote.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, here's mine.
Because the next quote is like, if a Terminator can come in. I had to cut that.
All right, here's mine. I woke up, the pain and sickness all over me like an animal. Then I realized what it was. The music coming up from the floor was our old friend Ludwig van in the dreaded Ninth Symphony.
Oh, this is a great quote. A Clockwork Orange.
Correctamundo. That's after he's had the procedure.
Stop it, stop! I love that movie. All right, guess this movie released year. Children of the Corn.
1978.
1984.
Damn it. Guess this movie release year. On the Waterfront.
1962?
54.
I knew it was, yeah.
It's quite old, yeah.
He's died before 1960, I think.
Who?
Wait, no, I mean
Brando?
Not Brando. I'm sorry. I got mixed up with
James
Dean for a sec. I was thinking of Issa Eden for a second. I always get them mixed up. Moving on to movie pop quiz time. Which franchise has more films? The Alien franchise or the Terminator franchise?
Good question. It's a lot for both of them now. I'm going to go Alien franchise.
Can you guess how many?
All right, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We count Alien vs. Predator? Yeah, that counts.
What do you got? 9?
9.
It's actually, so it's 6. It's actually a tie.
Uh-huh.
So both Alien franchise and Terminator franchise have 6 movies. Alien vs. Predator is actually not canon to Alien, so that technically does not count for an Alien franchise movie.
Says who?
It's canon to Predator.
Yeah, well, it's Alien in it. It's
not Alien.
It's Xenomorph.
I'm just saying it's.
So I would argue there's technically 8. No, I got it right then. I think I got it right.
9?
Yeah.
Name the other ones.
The Alien Predator crossovers.
There's how many? There's 1.
There's 3.
There's 3 Alien vs. Predator crossovers.
I think so.
Name,
at least 2.
What?
There's at least 2.
There's AVP. AVP came out. What year is that? AVP.
There's 2. Alien vs. Predator and then Aliens vs. Predator Requiem.
They're not canon to Alien.
Yeah, well, there's aliens in it.
Still, it would only be 8.
The Xenomorphs in it. Well, I was close.
It was a trick question, though, because it was a tie. Because I don't count Alien vs. Predator or Alien vs. Predator.
Well, so it's your personal opinion then.
It's not. It's factual information that they're not canon to Alien. They're canon to Predator.
Says who? Wikipedia?
No, says freaking James Cameron and everyone who made those franchises and Ridley Scott and all them. They're Predator movies.
Yeah, but Alien's in it. There's like 100 xenomorphs in it.
But I said part of the franchise. They're not part of the Alien franchise. They're part of the Predator franchise.
It's part of the franchise. Who owns the franchise? 20th Century Fox. I think
Disney.
I think they call it part of the franchise.
I'm just saying.
I disagree with you. I completely disagree.
Hey, you can disagree with me all you want.
Yeah, but I'm still wrong.
Either way.
But I think I was closer than I.
Well, it was a tie,
yeah.
and then you add those, then it's 8. Because they both would have 6 minus the crossovers.
Understand.
Trick question. Moving on.
Here's my quiz question. Before he was a household name, Harrison Ford acted in 2 films from world-famous directors. What were the films, and who were the directors?
Let's see. We have Apocalypse Now from Francis. Francis Ford Coppola. And then we have... He's in a George Lucas movie.
I'm sorry, same director. They're
Okay.
both Coppola movies. Sorry.
So then his other movie with Francis Ford Coppola that he was in that before he was famous was a movie called...
You know this one. Come on, Coppola.
I know, I'm just thinking of Harrison Ford Coppola. No. The Conversation?
Yes.
Yeah. Got
He
it.
plays the assistant to the boss guy.
Oh, yeah.
The messenger guy.
Got it. Great question.
I knew you'd get it. Great answer, man.
Thanks, man. All right. Do we have any...
What are we doing here?
Do we have any unsubscribes?
Yeah, we have an unsubscribe. we just filmed. This is our 3rd day in a row, so we actually banged through a ton. But there's one new one. Travis Ryan, 1456 wrote, "What? Not even at least 5 Hallmark Christmas movies to contend with? Unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe.
Happy holidays, guys." Thanks, Travis.
Great 5-star review from Mashiro, a new listener. Fantastic. I've been looking for a podcast I can just listen to. Found these guys on TikTok and decided to check it out. Thank you so much for doing that. First few podcasts were good, but sound was super low, but it was fixed after those episodes. Yeah, those early ones. We weren't really sure what we were doing yet. All the conversations pull you in and make it feel like you are sitting with them, chatting it up. That's what we want it to feel like. Love their touch on multiple topics and how they can tie in so many levels of perspective. This is great. I'll listen every day if I can. Wow, thank you so much.
Thanks, pal.
That is a wonderful 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. So glad you took the chance on us from TikTok and checking out these guys over here just talking about movies. Now, on this day in film history, today is December 26th. Hope you all had a wonderful holiday if you were with your families. Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, it's all been going on. So hope you are safe and well and enjoying your time with your families and loved ones. In 1924, Frances Gumm, who was later named Judy Garland, made her debut in show business at age 2.5, billed as Baby Frances. I think that was on stage or something. In 1940, The Philadelphia Story is released. In 1957, Wild Strawberries is released from, obviously, Ingmar Bergman. In 1976, The Exorcist is released. In 1997, Spice World is released. In 2007, There Will Be Blood is released. In 2011, We Bought a Zoo is released. And happy birthday to Jared Leto and Jon Snow himself, Kit Harington.
I didn't ask for it.
I was waiting for that. That's why I paused. My streaming recommendation is Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths on Netflix. This is Inarritu's newest film.
My recommendation is Thelma and Louise, which is now on Amazon Prime. It's the best good for her movie ever. Ridley Scott and 2 of the best actors of their heyday, Susan Sarandon and Gina Rollins. Love it. Check it out if you haven't seen it.
All right, let's get back into Pandora. And
We have a Godfather. We have a shout out.
Oh, who we got?
Sal Koching
Sal
is a chosen one patron.
Sal.
Thank you so much, Sal. We appreciate you. You're an old friend, and we appreciate your support for the show. Hope you've been well. Haven't seen you in a while, but we miss you. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world to us.
Really, thank you, Sal. Sally, you're the best. Appreciate you so much. Now, let's get back into our episode on Avatar, and I have a ton of cool behind-the-scenes information I pulled from some articles from
Let's hear it.
the New York Times as well as IBC, because, you know, this is a complicated film, and people are like, why did it take 13 years to make, even though they were filming in 2017? But the first thing that they had to figure out was, obviously, they did motion capture for the first film and created that virtual filmmaking that we talked about in that first episode. Now it's kind of common. A lot of video games do this as well, where you're basically creating a virtual reality environment while you're filming, and you basically do this pre-filming. Then you're filming on your stage in your studio with your actors in mocap suits, but on your displays, on your computers, in your monitor, you're seeing crude renderings of the environments of the scenes that they're going to be in. They can see all the creatures, the skies. It's obviously not detailed, the trees and bushes, but you can see basic elements and crude renderings in CGI in animations of the things that are in the shots or in the world around you. It's like a 360 view of what you've created in this program, and that's how they're filming this movie. It took a long time to develop all of that, but the biggest challenge first was figuring out how to do motion capture underwater, because it never really been done before. And the first major obstacle here was figuring out how to do it without scuba gear, because you can't go down there with scuba gear. There's too many bubbles flying around everywhere. It'd be impossible to capture the actors in their mocap suits. It'd be impossible to do that because there's just too much motion in the water. It'd mess it all up. So basically what they had to do was have the actors dive and hold their breaths. And it took a lot of time for them to practice these maneuvers. And obviously they did it very safely. But the first step obviously was creating a giant tank to have for filming. And they did this actually in Manhattan Beach Studios in the west side of Los Angeles. So after a proof of concept stage, 2 massive tanks were engineered at Cameron and Ladow's Lightstorm Entertainment Hub at Manhattan Beach Studios. One used for training and more intimate character scenes. The larger second tank, the Swiss Army knife of water tanks as it's called, measuring 120 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 30 feet deep, with 250,000 gallon capacity, was outfitted with powerful wave and current machines used to capture the film's more action-packed sequences involving Na'vi characters. Performance capture cameras were set up around the tank's perimeter, along with safety cameras for monitoring those in the water. To control light reflection from above, the water's surface was covered with small white floating balls, inspired by an LA Times article Chapney read about shade balls deployed in Los Angeles Reservoir to reduce evaporation, from a similar method Cameron used on his 1980 film The Abyss. So that's why, if you've seen set photos, we talked about this in like episode a couple months ago when we were talking about just what we'd seen behind the scenes. There's a shot of Cliff Curtis, Kate Winslet, Zoe Saldana, and Sam Worthington. Their heads are just above the water in a giant tank, and they have floaties and their mocap suits on, as well as all these white plastic balls all over the surface of the water. That was to stop the light, or to control the light from above from just ruining the shots down below in the water of the tank, so they could get really clear visuals down there when they were doing motion capture. Really clever stuff. To capture the underwater action with sufficient clarity, it was not possible for anyone in the tank to use scuba gear again, because air bubbles would interfere with the accuracy of the motion capture sensors and cameras. How could Cameron keep his cast in water long enough to capture their performances? Just holding their breaths the entire time. Everyone, including new and returning actors like Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Sigourney Weaver, Kate Winslet, as well as reference camera operators, grips, and safety divers accompanying each actor, would have to work at holding their breath underwater, which required extensive training, additional safety procedures, and lots of time. And Kate Winslet beat Tom Cruise's record for holding her breath underwater for a scene, which I'm sure we'll be seeing that in the third film, because her character doesn't have a ton of action sequences in this movie.
But also they weren't like coming up for air every time they ran out of breath. They would keep oxygen tanks down on the floor, so when they would like run their scene, they'd go back down to the bottom and breathe the air and get the oxygen from the tanks. So that's how they actually stayed underwater for hours on end. And Sam Worthington was actually the only actor who, throughout filming, just always maintained a presence underneath the water and never came up for a break, because he found it actually more peaceful, and everyone else would like after a few hours to take a break up above the surface, but he always stayed below.
Now, Kirk Crack was the free diving instructor and kind of the safety coordinator in charge of these actors for holding their breath and diving underwater. And obviously Sigourney Weaver, who's I think 65 years old, impressed Kirk Crack immensely, because she played Kiri in the motion capture entirely. So she's playing a character who's like a teenager doing all this intense stuff at 65 years old, at the bottom of a tank, holding her breath. Incredibly impressive. Really, really great stuff. Also, Weta Digital, Weta Effects are the visual effects company, obviously, that Peter Jackson co-founded when they were making the Lord of the Rings movies back in Wellington, New Zealand. They worked, obviously, on Avatar, the first film, and this one. And like I said, creating the CGI water was a huge challenge, and most of the water in this film is visual effects. So, according to the New York Times, nearly all of the water in the film is computer generated. Of the 3,240 visual effects shots Weta worked on, 2,225 involved creating water. To bring Pandora to life, the team at Weta had become experts not only in hydrodynamics, but also in rendering those complex physics photorealistically. The way water splashes, sprays, and saturates in the parlance of the industry had to be solved. Again, this had never really been done on this level. We'd seen, pretty decent realistic water in animated films before, but on the scale that we're seeing, not just the ocean, the waves, the splashing, but when you're watching this movie, just watching the water trickle down faces looks incredibly realistic. Plus the rain as well. Phenomenal. Now, according to Eric Sandin, one of the visual effects supervisors at Weta, there were something like 1,600 different major effects simulations of the water, the proper flow of waves on the ocean, waves interacting with characters, waves interacting with environments, the thin film of water that runs down the skin, the way hair behaves when it's wet, the index of refraction of light underwater. We wanted to make it all physically accurate. As part of their research, the team shot hundreds of hours of reference footage. Wind ripples on the surface of water, waves hitting rocks, the movement of seaweed. Sainton enlisted a friend to get dunked on camera so that the team could study the effects of water on curly hair. Cameron himself provided reference material from his own deep-sea dives, as well as he filmed a lot of reference material when he made Titanic about water and how it works and moves with camera development. Weta pioneered ways to make things look wetter, recently filing a patent application for methods of generating visual representations of a collision between an object and a fluid, which sounds like it was very complicated to make. This innovation was especially useful in one sequence where a human character named Spider, our guy, Space Tarzan, emerges onto some rocks by a group of Na'vi dripping with water. The shots blend live-action footage of the actor Jake Champion, who was filmed in a wave pool, with the CG of the Na'vi. That's a great point you made earlier when you're watching Spider with the Na'vi, how incredible it looks, the CGI, but also the water. He's wet with real water versus the Na'vi, the motion captured characters. They have CGI water on top of them, which you can't even distinguish between the two.
It's amazing.
Absolutely incredible. Now, I got a little more here. Let me see what I got.
It's fascinating. Keep going.
Let me see some more stuff
so
I
cool.
got. Production designer, this is from IBC. Dylan Cole was tasked with designing everything relating to natural Pandora and the Na'vi, while PD Ben Proctor was charged with focusing on the environments, vehicles, and weapons of the film's human industrial military unit called Resources Development Administration. So I think that's a really smart thing to do, to have two different production designers, one developing the Na'vi and Pandora, one developing the Sky People's technology in their look as well. I think it just adds so much. It's kind of like when Hans and James Newton Howard did different themes for Batman Begins, whether it's Bruce or Batman.
Exactly.
Cole gave the Reef people, the Metkaina clan, a slightly different shade of blue than the Amatkaya, and that's Jake Sully and Neytiri's clan that they have to exile from, with a different physiology and thick protuberances of fin-like cartilage beneath the skin. We talked about that earlier. A mammalian species called Lu was conceived as a cross between a biplane version of a manta ray fused with the long neck of a plesiosaur with the carotid wings of a European jet fighter. I believe those are the things that the Metkaina fly and ride on in the water. By contrast, the creatures called skimwing are amphibious, with the design inspired in part by the flying fish, but with a different shape head and bright Pandora rings. I believe they created over 60 different new species of animals for Pandora and for the Na'vi to interact with. Let's move on to some more. Let's talk about the cinematography for Avatar: The Way of Water. Again, this is from IBC. Performance capture of the lead actors, including Kate Winslet, Zoe Saldana, Sam Worthington, and child actor Jake Champion, began as early as September 2017 and ran for roughly 18 months, with Cameron and the cast working on scenes for all 4 of the sequels. You know what's crazy to me is they were filming this so long ago, And we just got behind the scenes photos like last year or early this year of them in the tanks and everything.
It makes you feel like they were filming it last year. You know what I mean?
It's nuts. Yeah. It's so long ago. We were only in LA for 3 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was 3 years before the pandemic.
That's absolutely bonkers to me. Russell Carpenter, who shot Cameron's True Lies as well as winning a Best Oscar for cinematography for Titanic, was tasked with designing an interactive lighting scheme that would combine CG with live action. Virtual lighting for the film took a full year in prep alone, so that's incredible. They also developed virtual lighting as well as the virtual filmmaking of the 3D cinematography. According to Carpenter, our lighting that we did in the live action scenes had to merge seamlessly with whatever environment we were in, whether it was a dense jungle or underwater or in the RDA facilities. The lighting team built a system of moving lights which could be operated remotely, allowing them to make extremely precise strikes of light exactly where they should be. Acquisition was made natively, aka not processed, in 3D and 4K using Sony Venice cameras in their Rialto format, which enables the sensor block to be separated from the camera's processing hardware, handy for stereoscopic pairing. Data was fed through a pipeline at various resolutions and frame rates, including 3D 48 frames per second in 2K and 4K, 3D 24 frames per second in 2K and 4K, and 3D 24 frames per second in HD for Cameron on set to be looking through the monitor at. And actually, Anthony brought this up before the episode. He said, did you notice that there were different frame rates? I'm like, I think, you're right. So they shot in 2 different frame rates, which is really interesting.
I was like watching, I was like, there's definitely going back to 24 frames a second a few times. Also, what's cool about the lighting is they were using huge LED screens. There's a shot of a sequence when there's fire lighting most of the set during one of the night sequences, and they had huge, like basically like LED screens with flames burning on the screens digitally to light as if fire was pouring on their faces, which I thought was a really smart way to do it.
And you know what I noticed with the cinematography in this movie compared to the first Avatar film is they were doing a lot more nuanced and advanced camera techniques like focus pulls that you didn't really see very much in the first Avatar film, where it's the same shot, we're focused on a character close to the screen, then it pulls focus to a different character on the screen, which is very complicated to do, not just practically in real life because it's easy to mess up, but just to do that with motion captured CGI rendering characters is kind of mind-blowing if you think about it.
100%.
What else can we talk about? We can talk about the high frame rates. So high frame rates alternates between 24 and 48 with the director dialing between the two in the final picture, using the higher speed to smooth the motion in faster action sequences and toning it down during slower dialogue sequences. I think that's what you were seeing. It was slowed down for the dialogue moments. This was likely done using post-production process called True Cut Motion, with which Cameron recently remastered Avatar and Titanic.
I think the reason for him doing that is the higher frame rate of 48 frames per second. It kind of takes you out of the film illusion, and it looks a little too like you're watching a video on YouTube maybe. This because the motion's so smooth, but it works with action. And then watching performances with that high frame rate it kind of maybe takes you out of it. And so I think going back to 24 during dialogue moments, during dramatic moments is probably the best decision to make because of the frame rate change.
Now let's talk about some editing. With Cameron, the editorial team led by Stephen Rivkin, John Rafora, and the late David Brenner selected the best performances for each moment of a given scene into performance edits in preparation for the virtual cameras to create specific shots. This was a technique that Cameron helped pioneer in 2009 and has since evolved into full-blown virtual production, enabling him to integrate CG versions of live action performances into a CG environment. It is bonkers what you can do now, what they've developed. Now, according to him, I could see everybody where they're supposed to be, above or below the water. I could talk to them over the diver address system. They were acting to real-time direction based on what I was seeing in my virtual camera.
That's amazing.
He's literally walking around on set with a camera or a monitor, seeing the virtual environment as the actors are performing in mocap.
That's
and
wild.
You see the renderings of the avatar in that. Absolutely insane. Once the virtual camera shots were edited into cut sequences, the CG shots and live action performances were turned over to Weta. In effect, the editing team were pre-editing sequences including all CG lighting, CG props, CG costumes, characters, creatures, and environments ahead of the live action photography. So they're already developing all this stuff in the scenes and the locations before they even started filming. It's a hybrid form of the craft that that merges the editing techniques of pacing and shot selection used to create wholly animated films with the flexibility of honing the story based on performance and multicam captured on set.
Oh, it's basically a combination of both styles of filmmaking. It's amazing to see how much technology was developed before they even started filming.
Yeah, really interesting. It's really cool. And he's basically editing on set in a lot of ways. He's taking different moments from different takes to just capture and make the scene out of, like, while they're there.
Yeah.
Which is really incredible. It's efficient, even though it took so long to make.
But it seems like it's the only way to really pull it off.
Let's move on to some more stuff. How about costume design?
Let's do it.
Although the vast majority of Na'vi costumes were only going to be realized digitally on screen by Weta Effects, even though it looked so goddamn real.
Like the strap around his hand.
Incredible.
I was like, is that real?
Many of the costumes and much of the jewelry were fabricated by costume designer Deborah Scott as real, tangible items. One of the reasons that we've made the garments to completion is that the motion of the garment cannot be understood without having a whole piece. If something's heavy or feathery or light or stringy, the way these things move in the air, standing at a breeze, underwater, you really have to have that sample to see what happens to it. So that's really fascinating that they created all these props and wardrobe in real life.
Yeah, a couple of simple things that I found really impressive was this strap around Jake's hand that he wraps around his hand. Also, the bracelet that Neytiri holds. And I felt like with CGI objects, especially things like something like a bracelet or a necklace, it always never looks real because of how the object interacts with the space. But it felt like it was really being held and it was a real object. And I think that makes sense how they did it by actually building these pieces for the actors to actually physically interact with, and also for the filmmakers to capture on film, on digital cameras, like how this thing actually moves in the world. So I think that made all the difference in the world.
Let's read some more from IBC about the visual effects. For the first film, Weta had developed an image-based facial performance capture system using a single SD head rig camera to record the actor's facial expression and muscle movements, including eye movement. This head rig has been upgraded to HD for the sequel, with 2 HD cameras designed to capture even higher fidelity performance. Every element of the lush, exotic world needed to be created and rendered digitally. More than 5 years of R&D went into writing new software and methodology for the sequel, which claimed significant breakthroughs in lighting, shading, and rendering of scenes set underwater. Again, this is why this movie took 13 years to make. It took them 5 years just to develop the technology before they could start production, which is shocking. The final bit of behind-the-scenes information I found, shooting out Avatar 2, 3, and 4. Not only has much of the performance capture been already made for some of the principal actors for Avatar 3 and 4 after 2, but many scenes have already been shot for Avatar 3 and some for the 4th series. I believe he has a 9-hour cut of Avatar 3, and he has the first act filmed for Avatar 4. And again, Avatar 5 has not been greenlit, but Avatars 2, 3, and 4, obviously 2 just released. 3 and 4 are greenlit. They're in production.
Yeah.
They're going to get made no matter what.
So I think the studio is just waiting to see if should we keep spending this much money on it.
And they'll be coming every 2 years. So 2024 we'll get Avatar 3. And then in December 2026 we'll have Avatar 4.
It's amazing to see how, the 13-year difference, and you're like, oh, what's been taking so long? And then you realize it has been a nonstop production ever since the first film. Like they've just still been going full tilt. It's just all behind the scenes development and prototypes and testing. And it seems like they never slowed down the production. It's just that they weren't able to film for several years because of the technology problem. So it's amazing to see how much went into this film. It's fascinating. And congrats to the entire crew, every facet of the production, for sticking through it for this long time to craft something that, has never been done before. And it felt like a wholly unique experience at the cinema for me.
And it took 18 months to film.
Yeah.
It took 18 months to do the performance capture shooting for Avatar 2, which is why they're filming Avatar 4 right now, and it took so long to film Avatar 3. It takes over a year just to film each of these films in the motion capture, in the tanks.
Amazing.
And everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal work. It's just breathtaking what they've accomplished. Now, I do have another con with this movie that I want to talk about. And it just adds to the kind of oftentimes cliche characters and cliche plot. I know Sully stick together is a motto with the group, but these kids are constantly just like they're always getting into trouble. Like every day they're getting into crazy amounts of trouble. Not to mention they're getting put in dire situations, life or death situations, and they're always bringing all of the kids. Like they're always bringing little Took.
Yeah.
Like Took, you should leave her. Like Kiri brings Took.
Kiri, come on. What are you doing? What are you bringing her for?
Kiri, like when they go to try to save Loak or help Loak with his Tolt gun. And Kiri, you should not be taking Took. You should be throwing her back. She is like 8 years old. Like, what's going on? So all the kids are always in these life or death situations together. I get it, slowly stick together. That's like a motto. But sometimes it's like, it's just kind of forced plot to get them all together so that Neytiri and Jake have to we have to save all of our kids at one time. It's like the stakes are so high every time.
Yeah, I totally agree. But also in the finale, I was like, oh man, let's go get our kids back.
It's intense.
Let's get our kids back. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
But also they could have just done that for one. But like every time, why is Took being taken out into these dangerous situations? Goodness,
little Took. But ultimately, I think this improved on the original film in a lot of ways, and I found it extremely emotional. And very powerful and profound with its messaging. And again, the CGI is the best I think that's ever been done in film history. And I can't wait to see the next one. Honestly, I think that they're valid to keep getting made. There's nothing else like it out there. It's really an event and a truly incredible spectacle to behold in 3D. And I can't wait to see it again, actually.
Yeah. Again, we've only seen it once, so we're just kind of running through the plot because we're not still there's so much to go over. And this is a 3-hour and 20-minute movie. Did you go to the bathroom during it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went real quick. There are definitely moments where everyone's like, all right, I can go right now.
When I went, I saw 6 other people
Me
went.
too,
It was I was like, oh, perfect timing.
It was in the water stuff.
It was the whale stuff.
It was getting a little slow.
A little of the whale stuff.
It was a little slow, so people were like, all right, I think this is a good spot for me.
Because when you factor in the 30 minutes of trailers and commercials, it's like you're there for 4 hours.
It's a long time.
It's hard to not go to the bathroom for 4 hours.
Plus, you're driving there, driving home. It's a 5-hour event going to see this Avatar movie.
You got to take a piss sometime. I think I chose a great part. But you chose a good part too.
Yeah, I chose right after they get rescued by Neytiri and Jake when the Marines first come.
Yeah, basically nothing happened. It was just nothing important.
It was a little slow for a little bit.
But I had to move my seat because there's a person in between us based on the tickets that we got. And they smelled like BO, and I was getting BO smell wafting towards me. And for 5 minutes, I tried it for 5 minutes. Then I moved over a seat, and James thought I left
because I was on the other side of this person. We couldn't get tickets together. Someone had got this perfect middle seat, so I was on their left. Anthony was on their right, and I was watching the movie. And I saw that Anthony got up with my peripheral vision. I thought he was going to the bathroom. And then 20 minutes go by. I'm like, is he still not back from the bathroom? I was like, I thought you got motion sickness or something, just like when we saw Prometheus. So I was like, should I check on him? Should I go? So I went to the bathroom when it slowed down, and I'm like, I guess he's not here. Then I walked past you. I didn't notice you. You were just 2 seats away with your hood on over your entire head. Just I guess trying to get rid of that wafting smell because I didn't pick up on any of it on the left side of the person.
It must have been the airflow and how it must have been pointing at me because I had to put my hood up and cover any wind from.
Yeah, I saw you. Your hood was squeezed tight like a scrunchie.
I was like, I can't. It was unbearable. It was just bad BO.
I was like, I guess
terrible.
Anthony's really into this movie. He's just sitting over there, just by himself, hood up.
It was bad. But I ended up moving over and it worked out. And I was just getting hints of it here and there, but it wasn't bothering me. So it was weird. So yeah, I didn't leave.
But yeah, I think this was definitely a worthy sequel to the first Avatar film. I think James Cameron pulled it off. He just showed us something we'd never seen before when it comes to spectacle and animation and CGI and motion capture and how far this technology that they've been developing the last 13 years has come. It was really incredible, and I've never seen anything like it. It was awe-inspiring. It was shockingly cool. It was a good time. It was an excellent film, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it's in my top 10 of the year.
Yeah,
movies.
I give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I give it about 8 out of 10 too.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this year, we've had a great year of movies.
So
I'm not sure if Avatar: The Way of Water is in my top 10 for the year, but that's not saying that it's not a great film.
I have to see it again, but I really enjoyed it.
So I don't know what the rewatch value is going to be. I'm sure it's going to be pretty high. I probably won't go see it again in theaters. Maybe
I'm gonna see it in 2D.
Maybe in 2D. Yeah, I'll watch it when it comes out streaming. But I saw my one ticket. I'm not gonna. We have to see this movie 7 times. It has to.
There's a lot of good movies coming out this month.
We don't.
There's a lot.
We don't
to
have
see.
to give all the $2 billion to this one movie.
Yeah,
I get James Cameron wants that $2 billion. So does Disney.
They'll get the rewatches in China for sure.
But yeah, it's gonna make a boatload of money. It'll probably make $2 billion.
I think it will.
It was excellent. Great job. Let us know how much you all enjoyed this film. Thanks for tuning into our episode on Avatar, The Way of Water. Become a patron today at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast, and be sure to get tickets to our live show on Saturday, January 21st, 2023, with the link in our Instagram bio and YouTube bios and episode bios of this podcast episode.
See you next time.
This episode of Raiders of the Lost Podcast was executive produced by our chosen one patrons: Luke Exelston, Tyler McFly, Darren Singleton, Anthony DeMeo, Becca Keene, Cody Moen, Benjamin Cook, Calvin Cam, and Chandler Johnson. Thank you so much for supporting our show. Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well, notifications for sure. Listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out this other content we have on our YouTube channel.